Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So today is day 3 of the urban game. So the chat box question that we talked about today was, why do you think people in our day and age were so stressed out? We saw a variety of different answers. Some of it had to do specifically with coronavirus, but other things had to do with like how much people had to work, their relationship with technology, more of like that we have a lot of like intellectual strain, that there's like a lot of strain on our brains. And then we also talked about what we do, what is it that we do to relax? And for some people, they talked about, that some people will self medicate. So somebody will reach out and maybe they will use either illegal or illegal drugs for whatever reason, hoping that those people are of the appropriate age. But specifically talking about the Industrial Revolution, people just, they were so overwhelmed with this new reality that a lot of them self medicated. But another thing that we talked about was like what our natural reaction is, like what people do when they feel like they need to get away from it all. And again, one of those reactions is self medicating, but another one is to get out into nature. What you're going to see in the Industrial Revolution is we're going to have this separation from what we have evolved to be calmed by and be integrated with, because we have for so many millennia been so integrated with the land and being outside and animals and being social with each other, that transitioning to this industrial world where we spend so much time not interacting with the outdoor world, not interacting with animals, not interacting with people, but working and using our physical labor or our intellectual labor constantly, um, without those things adds additional stress, and that's going to be a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. So before you get rolling today, make sure that you have the village completed through round 10. Now, I know for some of you, I think it's sixth period, we only got to station 8 or round 8 in class. So go back to the last video to finish those last 2 rounds before you come to this video. So you need to have your village up to round 10, a pencil, and an eraser. This is what our original village looked like. So we're moving on into the next day. In the last day, we ended adding 10 special homes because we were talking about the new wealth and the old wealth. That you had poor people who were barely eking out an existence. Again, it's, they're working for a wage. So they're not profiting as the business profits, which traditionally was the model in business before that point, that people who worked for you were often partners in your business or apprentices. And so they would eventually inherit part of your business. In a capitalist model, the capitalist or the owner of the business owns the business and pays workers a wage, and the workers don't get a part in the business. So all of the profits, anything above what the cost it is to run the factory, the profit goes to the capitalist, which again is not an inherently bad system, but with absolute power, it corrupts absolutely. So there's no government checking, saying, hey, like, you really can't take advantage of people this way. You can't pay them $2 an hour. You need to pay them a livable wage. There's nobody saying that. And there are going to be some people who do the right thing, um, because human nature will encourage us to do that. But then there's also this other side of human nature that pushes us to serve our own needs. It's our natural driving force. It's an evolutionary survival technique that you focus on your own needs. And if you have the luxury of thinking about other people's needs, great. But you often will serve your own needs first. And so you'll find that you have people coming up out of the poorer classes that are able to get the capital and become very wealthy. And then you have these people who are in stark poverty. And so we added some extra special homes. All right, so now we're opening up in round 11. So the year is 1785. So we are after the American Revolution, kind of in the middle of the French Revolution. A man named James Watt is going to invent an absolutely revolutionary machine. It's called the steam engine. The steam engine we still use today, and it hasn't really changed much from its original format with James Watt. We even will use James Watt's steam engine model for things like nuclear power. Basically, how a steam engine works is you burn coal because it burns really, really hot over water, and that water creates pressure and it causes movement. And so it's going to cause things to move in the factory, but it requires burning coal to do it. This can be far, far more efficient than the water frame because it burns hotter and it causes more pressure. And so the machines can move faster. They're more powerful. You can run more machines at a time. And also, now this type of engine, you don't have to be built on the river anymore. So there's a lot more options where your factories can be. So this source of power is going to be mobile. So capitalists are quickly going to replace their water frames with steam-powered weaving and spinning machines. And the main business in England is now going to be textile manufacturing. England kind of does this thing where they like keep it a secret and they try to like keep the other countries from knowing what's going on because they're making so much money across the world selling fabric. And so this is going to be the one primary thing that they're producing in England. So what you need to do is you need to add 10 factories with smoke because now we're producing power with coal. You also need to go back and add smoke to all existing factories. So you should have 6 existing factories. You're going to add 10, so a total of 16 factories with smoke. You also need to add 1 nicer house because people are continuing to get rich who own these factories. So pause the video, complete this part of the assignment, and come back to the video when you're done with the drawing and you're ready to go. Okay, the year is 1800. A man named Henry Cort has just invented the puddling process. So the puddling process makes it possible for coal, because again, coal burns hotter for longer, um, to be used to create iron. So iron is a type, really any type of metal, you have to smelt it. So you have to heat it up as hot as you can, and then it will melt, and then you can mold it into a form. Okay. But this method burns the iron at such a high temperature that it becomes so much more pure and it becomes incredibly strong. So consequently, your new town is now thrust into the new age of heavy industry. To be able to build skyscrapers and have trains and have all of these things that we associate with an industrial world, you've got to have really strong steel. And so this is going to change the game. So large factory districts are going to appear, which are going to manufacture iron at low prices. That's another part of this process, is it makes it very cheap because coal is so cheap. So they're going to be able to manufacture iron at really low prices, which then is going to be transported by your canal. So you're going to make some money on it. It's not very fast, though. I mean, you think about putting steel on a boat, it's not going to be able to move very fast. So I want you to add 1 new coal mine and a new iron bridge to replace the old wooden bridge. So you should have 2 existing bridges right now. Pick one of those bridges and turn it into an iron bridge. So it's going to kind of look like the bridge design that we have here. This is something that can take a lot of weight. That's going to be really important here in the next few phases. So add 1 coal mine somewhere in town, and then replace one of your wooden bridges as a steel bridge. So go ahead and pause the video to complete that, and then come back to the video so you can finish. Okay, the year is 1815. Coal miners are busy mining coal because of the great demand for home heating and fuel for their steam engines and production of iron. In the 1700s, coal miners are adults. Remember, back in the village, there were adults who did it in the winter to supplement the fact that they couldn't grow food in the winter. But by the 1800s, they're typically children between the ages of 8 and 14. So we're going to talk more specifically about the children of England and the orphans of England, and how England viewed them. But there's a lot of reasons why children become more attractive. First of all, you can pay them less. If you were paying a man $2 an hour, you would pay a woman $1 an hour, and you would pay a child 50 cents an hour. So if you're looking at your overall profits and how much money you're making, you're going to make a lot more money by hiring kids than hiring an adult man. Also, Children are small. Coal mines are small. And so the thinking is that they're more suited. Their small hands are more suited for that. And it's going to be the same in the factories, that their small hands are more suited for fixing the machinery. But coal mines are dangerous. We hear even in our modern times, at least once every couple of years, of a mine collapsing on people in modern times. So imagine how dangerous the structure would be. Then on top of it, they're trapped in these tiny coal mines for 15 hours a day, 14 hours a day. And it's basically, coal is basically like a soot, like when it disintegrates and you chip it out. So they're breathing in this black dust. And it's going to cause what they refer to as black lung, which was very likely lung cancer at very, very young ages because of how much they were exposed to this dark soot, breathing it in all day long, every single day. It's also very dark in there. There are lots of accidents, lots of explosions because they're often using dynamite to access the coal. And so these kids' growth are going to be stunted because they're crunched over in a hole all day. So they end up looking like kids even longer. They're malnourished. And so their casualty rate goes up. So kids who are getting sick, kids who are dying. So draw one cemetery. All of these images that you see here are depictions of what it would really look like. You can see how young all of these boys are. They're maybe at the oldest 10. I mean, think about what you were like when you were 10 or your younger siblings. Again, the average age is between 8 and 14. So no matter what, younger than most of you. And they're working these incredibly dangerous coal mines. You can see this kid is like basically chained. Essentially, it's a form of slavery, what they're doing to these kids. And they're climbing, up the rails, pulling these. They're dropping them down into the coal mine. Again, you can see that these kids are very dirty. Again, pause the video, but you should have had plenty of time to draw the cemetery by now. Okay, it is now 1820, round 14. The existing canals and dirt roads cannot accommodate the new heavy industrial traffic. So remember all that steam, all that steel that they're producing, it just moves too slow. The steel's too heavy. And so new experiments with transportation using the power of steam engines are going to be tried. So remember, we had that revolutionary invention that started powering all the factories. Why don't we try to apply that to transportation? So the most successful one appears to be a steam engine that pulls a series of wagons and cars on an iron track, also known as a railroad. The first railroad is tested and is quite effective. Okay, this is probably one of the hardest things to do, requires the most brain power in this whole game. So what you need to do is you're going to add a major railroad line connecting all of your factories to your coal mining regions. So what you need to do is you need to start your railroad at one coal mine, and you need to weave through all of your houses and churches and factories so that the railroad crosses in front of every single one of your factories, crosses the river over the iron bridge, connects to all the other factories, and then goes back to another one of your coal mines. Make sure you should have a couple coal mines at this point. Make sure all of your coal mines are connected. This is probably going to take you a few minutes. So please make sure to pause the video, complete your major railroad line. Again, it needs to connect to all of your factories, even the ones on the river, as well as all of your coal mines. So take a minute to do that. Come back to the video when you're ready. All right, round 15. So it is now 1827. This new revolution in transportation is going to draw thousands of people to your community. So now all of those outlying regions that are connected by the railroad, now those people are going to start to come in looking for work. Soon there becomes a surplus of workers. Surplus means too many. Okay? And capitalists want to make sure that they make as much money as possible. I've already kind of mentioned this. So they start to hire women and children over men because they perform just about the same, but they produce for 1/2 or 1/4 the price. So again, you could pay a man $2 an hour, pay a woman $1 an hour, and pay a kid 50 cents an hour. Like, you're going to make so much more money that way. So more and more children are going to leave their homes to work in the factories. Unemployed men are going to be unable to find work. Especially, none of you at this point are heads of household, whether men or women. It's very difficult to not be able to provide for your family. So there's a lot of depression and shame, and a lot of men become resentful of their wives who now become the bread makers, or the breadwinners, and there's no one. People are lonely. Their children and their wives are working all day long. They can't get work. And so many of the men are going to turn to crime and a social life at the pub. Again, kind of that escapism. There's so much stress and anxiety and depression that they just want to escape. This is not a good method, but this is what they're doing. So, for the first time in England's history, alcoholism appears in epidemic proportions. And so, you're going to see major increases in child abuse, spousal abuse, other types of crime, because people are crowded together, people are idle. And you guys have seen, if you've paid much attention since we're all home during the pandemic, we've seen a major spike in crime since the pandemic started because people are just idle. They're just sitting around. So they've got the time to commit crimes. So for the first time in England's history, you have that epidemic. Family life that existed for hundreds of years in England is going to be disrupted. Family members seldom eat together or see each other at all. So you have children being raised by the factory, women working 24 hours a day, basically trying to maintain their families, men being absolutely helpless to help their families because they can't find work. And then some of those men ending up even more helpless as addiction kicks in. So add one jail and two pubs. Again, pause the video, add those two things, come back to the video. All right, it's 1835, round 16. Using steam engines, iron, and soon steel, British manufacturers are going to introduce power-driven machineries to all industries. So the production of shoes, clothing, ammunition, furniture, all become mechanized, as did printing, paper making. Remember when we talked about the printing press? It's like something that was done by hand. It was revolutionary, but it was still done by hand. So, think about all the people who are put out of work by machines doing all of this. So people use machines to cut and finish lumber, to process foods, and to make other machines. Some new inventions and innovative processes had important byproducts. So what a byproduct is something that is made as a result of making something else. So, like for example, oil is the base product, and we used oil for a lot of things. But the byproduct, so oil can be made into kerosene, and kerosene powers lamps. Okay? The byproduct of kerosene being made from oil is gasoline, one that we are probably much more familiar with. Gasoline is highly combustible, and so they were able to use that byproduct rather than wasting it and spilling it into oceans, which, oh my gosh, oceans and rivers. They start to use it for other things. One of those byproducts is going to be something called coke. So coke is a byproduct of using coal to burn. So it's basically what's left over after. And so they use that to improve the smelting process that helps adhere the iron together. And so someone discovered that the gases that coal released during the coke making process, so not only do you have coal and then you have coke being made, but the gases released when that's happening has a value too. We refer to that as natural gas. So during the late 1830s and in London and other large towns, they became the first communities to pipe in that gas to burn streetlights. So the streets were lit. One of the major ways that communities help cut down on crime is by lighting their streets. You'll notice if you drive around a town or you look at a town that there's almost a direct correlation, not always. Crimes happen where there are lights too. But you'll find that areas with higher crime rates often have fewer street lights. The more light that there is, the more opportunity for exposure. And so streetlights are really important to helping reduce crime. So soon, all around England, hundreds of towns are going to use gas lights to light the streets. So you are going to draw 20 street lamps all around town. Do them along the roads. They do not have to be beautiful. On my map, I drew a line with a square at the top. So you're going to draw 20 street lamps to light as much as possible. Remember, try to like focus on the city center, so like where the stores would be or the factories would be, but do them along the road. So you're going to add 20 lamps. And pause the video so that you can complete that task, and then pick back up when you're ready to go. All right, round 17. So it is 1838, and we're going to look at the working conditions in these factories. So the two most important types of factories are going to be fabric, so textile, and iron, or steel. Okay, so steel is used for heavy machinery like railroads and railroad tracks and skyscrapers and the things that are going to start being used, and also machinery. And then textiles are obviously fabric. So this is what people are going to be wearing. Working conditions are terrible. Okay, there are no safety precautions. There's no like guardrails. You have these really heavy machines. To help you understand, sewing machines slide back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. These massive machines that are creating these. If you get stuck between those machines, you're going to get crushed, which happened on many, many occasions. Steel, the whole puddling process is successful because of how hot coal burns. It burns hotter than fire. Okay, so you're dealing with this smelted metal with no safety precautions, with no repercussions for safety issues. There are going to be a lot of accidents. Many workers are going to contract the deadly factory fever or white lung disease. And we sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. We often will refer to this as cancer. It's probably cancer, possibly tuberculosis, which is highly contagious and probably spread through the factories, and also emphysema. So emphysema is another type of lung disease that's caused by breathing in chemicals. So a lot of time people who are smokers will breathe in those, will end up with emphysema. So other workers are going to be injured on the job in factory accidents. Children weakened from the lack of proper sleep or diet are going to stumble into the machinery and be absolutely mutilated. Women's hair is going to fall down because having extremely long hair in the Victorian period is incredibly common. It's going to come undone and get caught in moving machinery, and so they're going to get pulled into the machine. Regardless, if you're unable to work, you can't take a day off. If you take a day off because you're sick, you will be fired. Okay? There are no sick days, there's no health insurance, and there's always a line of people outside the door ready to take your job. Okay, so complaining is not an option if you want to eat. Okay, so round 17, add 2 hospitals and 1 more cemetery. And go ahead and pause the video to complete. So add 2 hospitals and 1 more cemetery. Round 18. It is 1840, so we're encroaching on the American Civil War. The need for quicker and cheaper transportation increases. Coal, iron, and finished products, raw materials, must be transported from one area of England to another. In the late 1830s, you're also going to have a devastating potato famine. Potatoes are going to come from the New World, and they're going to become a staple of poor white folks. Okay? Potatoes can be grown in massive amounts. They last a really long time, and they're relatively nutrient dense. They can keep you alive. And they become very reliant on potatoes. And then there's this terrible disease that goes through all of the potatoes in Ireland. And so those people are starving. So they start to flood into England to try to find work to be able to buy food. And this was the cheapest labor that they could find to build more railroads. So we kind of see racism as a fixed thing, often based on color, but that's not necessarily how it's always been in history. We always have a way of separating ourselves into groups and looking at other groups as less than us. And that's how the English looked at the Irish. To us, the English and the Irish look exactly the same. But to the English, the Irish were like cavemen. And so they treated them as less than human. So add 1 more railroad line. This railroad does not have to connect all of your factories, but it does need to connect some of your factories and at least 1 coal mine. It also needs to cross the river. You can cross roads with your railroad. You can cross over the other railroad line with your railroad as well. Just can't follow the exact same path. So go ahead and pause to finish that railroad line. Again, this only has to be a partial, doesn't have to be as long as the other one, just to help connect other factories, maybe find quicker ways for certain factories to certain coal mines. All right, round 19. By 1842, this year, several million acres of good English land was enclosed. So remember, we started with some of the commons disappearing. Now the rest of it's going to disappear. And it's going to be sold to private parties. This created England's landless poor. And the economic benefits for the rich were obvious. The rich were getting richer and the poor now had nothing. These large landowning farmers purchased the newest power-driven machinery and could easily grow enough food to feed the working class of England. So those people who did own land are going to be crushed by the enclosing of the commons. It's not just the poor people who are going to be affected. It's going to be landowners because now they can't grow food for any amount of profitability because they can't afford those machines. So thousands of people, including those landowners, are going to leave their villages where their ancestors had lived for hundreds of years and move into towns and cities looking for work to feed their families. Some refused to leave, but took jobs working for large landowning farmers. And by the thousands, they moved into the bleak, uninviting towns of the northern cotton mills. Okay, there's a big one. Add 20 houses, 5 restaurants, 2 stores, 1 church, 5 factories, 1 pub, and 1 nicer house. Okay, pause the video so that you can complete that task and come back when you're ready. All right, round 20. It is 1845, so getting close to that American Civil War. There are some advantages for many of the urban dwellers. City life is quite different from country life, and for small but growing middle classes, this whole new cultural life is available because the more people you put together, the more creative people get in making money. So museums, theaters, operas, restaurants, and plays and concerts are all made available, whereas before, only the aristocrats, only the Duke of Edinburgh, or the Countess of blah, 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 had access to the arts. Now the middle class, the people who are maybe managers at the factory or the owner of the factory, now can enjoy the fine life. They've come up out of the poorer classes and made a life for themselves where they can have some level of pleasure. So, add 2 theaters, 1 restaurant, and 2 private schools. Remember, there are no public schools at this point. The only people who get to go to school are people who can afford to pay for it. So go ahead and pause the video, fill in those things on your activity, and then come back. It is 1850, round 21. There are no pollution controls, so the air in your community looks dark. It's what they call the London fog. It's so dirty that it looks foggy, and you guys are familiar with this with our recent wildfires. That's what the air looks like, but it's full of toxic, poisonous industrial byproduct. Okay? The river that once flows through your quiet village for hundreds of years is now unfit for drinking, bathing, and laundry. Malignant, so cancerous tumors are going to grow in people's body, and the term cancer is going to be used for the first time in the medical profession during this time period. The average life expectancy for the poor classes is now 30. So I would be on my deathbed. Your city is overcrowded and shrouded in factory smoke. The noise, the loss of privacy, the loss of family unity shatters the peace of the old ways, and suicide rates are going to double and then they're going to triple. To accommodate the victims of urban life, add 1 cemetery, 1 jail, and 1 hospital. Take a second to complete this part of the task, and then come back, and I'll show you how we're going to finish this up. All right, so when you're done, I want you to go ahead and I want you to take a picture of your completed village. You can take that picture with your computer, you can take that picture with your phone, but go ahead and take a picture of your completed village. Okay, so you're going to turn in your original village and your completed village. And I'm going to show you my example of that here in a second. But before we do any turning in, I want you to go ahead and flip your paper over. You're going to handwrite this reflection on the back side of your paper in upper left-hand corner. And you're going to take a picture to turn it in. Okay, so the question is, the industrialization of the English countryside would set history on a path that would change the world forever. Progress on a grander and faster pace than had ever been seen in human history. All of this on a societal level, on a government level, is seen as progress. Reflecting back on that opening question, and based on your experience with this game, does progress always result in positive outcomes? Use examples from the game to support your answer. This response needs to be a minimum of 3 sentences. The more you give me, the better. Okay, you're going to write this on the back of your map. You're going to take a picture and you're going to turn it in. Okay. I'm going to show you an example here in just a second, but if you want to work on this question right this second, go ahead and pause the video. But I want to show you some things just really quickly. So again, take a picture when you're done. This is what you should see on your village when you turn it in. So you should have at least 1 river, at least 4 roads, but more than 4 roads, ideally 1 canal, 40 houses, 5 nice houses, 21 factories, 3 bridges, 1 of them iron, 5 stores, 5 tenements, 4 churches, 3 schools, 5 cemeteries, 2 railroads, 1 connects everything, 1 connects some, 8 pubs, 2 jails, 3 coal mines, 3 hospitals, 20 streetlights, 6 restaurants, and 2 theaters. Okay, so I might have done my math wrong there, so don't panic. I'm only going to be looking at certain things when I grade it, but if you're kind of got overwhelmed there, that's kind of the math that I did. I can't guarantee that's perfect math, but that's what I've come up with. And so this is essentially what your villages are going to look like if you compare the two. So I told you guys I was doing it with you. So this was my original village. This is what my village looks like now. Okay, so to turn this in, you're going to go back over to Google Classroom, and let me pull up the student version, so give me just a second. I apologize for the delay. So once you get into Google Classroom, urban game. Okay, so remember, you needed to attach a few things. You needed to attach, I'm going to pretend this is the picture of my village on the first day. So picture of your village on the first day, picture of your reflection on the first day. Now you're going to submit a picture of your village on the last day, which is today, and a picture of your village reflection question. You're going to add this if you're doing it from your computer using File. And if you're on your phone, you should be able to just take the picture and directly place it in there. You should have 4 attachments. Once you have all 4 attachments in there, go ahead and click Turn In. All 4 of those total 40 points, so it's a big assignment, so make sure you get that turned into me. If you have any additional questions, let me know, and I will be happy to answer them for you.